All right, your last type of solving is the quadratic formula. So the quadratic formula can be used with all quadratic equations to solve. So factoring can only be used if the quadratic can be factored. Completing the square can be used always, but can sometimes get complicated if you have that number in front of your x squared term. Remember, you have to divide. And when you divide, not every number is divisible by every number. So sometimes it's going to lead to a bunch of fractions and it's going to make life more complicated. So the quadratic formula can be used always, and typically is less complicated in most situations than completing the square. Not always, though. And it is more complicated than factoring, but not everything can be factored. Remember, when you are solving a quadratic equation, you are finding the solutions, which are the roots, zeros, or x-intercepts. So if I ask you to find the solutions, the roots, the zeros, the x-intercepts, I'm asking you to find the exact same things. Okay? The quadratic formula is x equals, or whatever your variable is, negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. Divide that all by 2a. That is your quadratic formula. You need to have that memorized. If you're bad with memorizing things, I'll show you some songs on YouTube that you can listen to help you memorize those. In order to use the quadratic formula, your equation must first be in standard form, which is ax squared plus bx plus c set equal to 0. So we have to be equal to 0. If you have a function or an equation that has ax squared plus bx plus c equal to y, or equal to f of x, you just replace that y or the f of x with 0. If, however, you only have your one variable, but you have something else over here, you have something like x squared plus 7x minus 9 equals 8, you need to move anything that's over here to your left side, get it set equal to 0. You also, though, could move everything from the left to the right, depending on how you want to move things. One side has to be equal to 0. After you have your equation in standard form, you need to identify what numbers, your values, for a, b, and c. A is the number in front of your quadratic term, a, x squared. This number right here. B is your number in front of your linear term, bx, whatever number's here. And c is your constant, the number by itself. Paying very close attention to if there is any negatives in front of any of those numbers. You need to make sure you simplify your square root if possible. Actually taking the square root or breaking down your square root like we've done before and you did in your last lesson. Also, if there's a negative under your square root, remember that that means your answer is imaginary, so make sure it's in the form a plus bi. So let's get to some examples. First is we need to be in standard form. I am not in standard form. I need my x squared and then my x and then my constant equal to 0. I am not equal to 0, so I need to move this 4x to the other side. Since it's positive, I'm going to subtract. I want x squared first and then my x term, so I'm going to squeeze that minus 4x in between there. My constant at the end. So I have x squared minus 4x minus 8. Now I'm equal to 0. Now I can solve using my quadratic formula. A is the number in front of your x squared term. There's no number, so it's 1. B is your number in front of your linear or your x term, which is a negative 4. And C is your constant, which is negative 8. Paying attention to your negatives. If there is not a number in front of x squared or x, it is 1. If, however, you are missing one of those terms, then your number would be 0. What I mean by that is if you had an equation like x squared minus 5 equals 0, here's my A, here's my C, I don't have an x term, so B would be 0. Substitute A, B, and C into your formula. So x equals, or if it wasn't an x, use your correct letter, negative B. So I need negative, and then my B value, which is negative 4. Plus or minus square root B, which is negative 4, squared, minus 4 times A times C. So B squared minus 4 times A times C That whole thing gets divided by 2 times a, which is 1. Now you're going to start simplifying some things. You are going to, if you haven't already done so, simplify the fact that this says negative, negative 4. 2 negatives make a positive. Some of you, when you wrote this step down, you maybe already did that, and that's fine. Next, you're going to keep your plus or minus, and you're going to keep the square root, but you are going to figure out what 4 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 8 is. I do not need you to figure that out on your own in your head. I need you to, in your calculator, not type in the square root. I need you to type in parentheses, negative 4 squared, minus 4 times 1 times negative 8. And I get 48. I have not taken the square root, so 48 is under the square root. All divided by, and once again, if you didn't already do 2 times 1, you would do that now. 2 times 1 is 2. Now you're going to take the square root or simplify your square root. So you can start by checking square root of 48. It doesn't reduce, so you're not going to use that decimal. You are then going to break down 48. So let's do that off to the side here. 48 is what? 2 times 24? 24 is 2 times 12. 12 is 2 times 6. 6 is 2 times 3. I need pairs. I have 2 and 2, which makes 4 square root of 3. So this is going to become x equals 4 plus or minus 4 square root of 3 divided by 2. So I just broke down my square root of 48. 2 and 2 gives me this 4. I'm left with the 3 underneath. Simplify the numerator if possible. You cannot do that here. There's nothing in your numerator to simplify. You cannot combine 4 and 4 because this second 4 is attached to a square root of 3. You can only simplify, and that's true, this is true for always, you can only simplify if you could take a square root. So like if this was the square root of 49 and you get 7, then you can simplify that. And I'll show you an example where you can do that. Divide your fractions if possible. So right here, this 4 divided by 2 is 2. And this 4 divided by 2 is 2 square root of 3. So I'm going to divide both of these numbers. The square root is like a variable. It's not, but it's similar to a variable in terms of you don't divide it, you just bring it down. So you divide your constant, 4 divided by 2, and then you divide the coefficient, 4 divided by 2, and then your answer in set notation. Remember your squiggly brackets. So there are 2 answers, 2 plus 2 square root of 3 and 2 minus 2 square root of 3. Oh, wait. Here you go. Find your x-intercepts. Same question. I need to find my solutions. I need to get set equal to 0. So I need to get rid of this 3t minus t squared. So 3t gets subtracted from the 5t, and the t squared, since it's negative, I need to add it. So 2t plus t, or 2t squared plus t squared is 3t squared. 5t minus 3t is 2t. Minus 1 doesn't change, equaling 0. A is 3, B is 2, and C is negative 1. So T equals negative B, which is negative 2, negative, and then your B value is 2, plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4 times A times C, all divided by 2 times A. I can't simplify this negative 2 anymore. It's just negative 2. So I'm going to keep that. Plus or minus, keep the square root, but I'm going to type in what's underneath that. So 2 squared minus 4 times 3 times negative 1. I get 16. So the square root of 16, all divided by 2 times 3 is 6. Now I'm going to simplify or take the square root. Well, the square root of 16 is 4. So I have t equals negative 2 plus or minus 4 all divided by 6. Now this is the step that last time that I got to skip. I can simplify my numerator. This is negative 2 plus 4. Negative 2 plus 4 is 2 divided by 6. And negative 2 minus 4 is negative 6 divided by 6. So I took my negative 2 and I added 4 divided by 6. And my negative 2 and I subtracted 4 divided by 6. And then I'm going to reduce my fractions, or actually divide. 2 over 6 is 1/3. Negative 6 over 6 is negative 1. There are your answers. And the last one, find your solutions. Same thing. I need it in standard form. You need to start with distributing here. So this is 3m squared plus 6m. I also need to get this negative 4 to the other side, so I'm going to add 4, and it just goes to the end. Now I have a, and b, and c. So m equals negative of my b value plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, all divided by 2 times a. My negative 6 is just a negative 6, plus or minus the square root of, let's take 6 squared, minus 4 times 3 times 4. I get negative 12. All divided by 2 times 3 is 6. Okay, 12. The square root of, well, first of all, remember, square root of negative 12 is an error because it's not real, right? But the square root of 12 also is not square rootable. So this means I, but my 12 I can break down to 2 times 6, 2 times 3. So this becomes m equals negative 6 plus or minus 2i square root of 3. 2i square root of 3, all divided by 6. Similar to the front, because you still have a square root, you can't simplify the numerator. So you're just going to divide or reduce your fractions to get your answer. So negative 6 divided by 6 is negative 1 plus or minus 2 divided by 6. It's not 3. 2 divided by 6 is 1/3 I square root of 3. Okay, and the last part we need to talk about is what is called the discriminant. The discriminant is part of the quadratic formula. It is just the b squared minus 4ac part of it. It's the part underneath but not including the square root. The discriminant tells you, based on that number, how many real solutions there will be. If that number is bigger than 0, so it's positive, there will be 2 real solutions. Like this one over here, this is a positive underneath here. I got 2 answers. 2 plus 2 squared of 3 and 2 minus 2 squared of 3. The x-intercepts on the graph will look something like this, where there are 2 x-intercepts. If, however, that number equals 0, there's going to be one solution. Because if it equals 0, the square root of 0 then is 0. And when you add 0 and when you subtract 0, you get the same number. So your x-intercepts for that will look something like this, where there's only one of them. And if, however, it is less than 0, which means it's negative, that's when there are 0 solutions, like this one. Not 0 solutions, 0 real solutions. There are no real solutions, there's only 2 imaginary. Your graphs would look something like this, where it never crosses your x-intercept, never crosses your x-axis. So, find the discriminant, determine the number of solutions. B squared minus 4ac is all we need to do. B is negative 3, so negative 3 squared minus 4 times negative 2 times 5. Negative 3 squared minus 4 times negative 2 times 5 is 49. There's your discriminant. which means since it's positive, 2 real solutions. B squared minus 4 times A times C. Negative 3 squared minus 4 times A times C is negative 47 is your discriminant, which means no real solutions. Positive is 2, negative is none. B squared. B squared minus 4 times A times C. 4 squared minus 4, 4 squared minus 4 times A times C is 0, which means 1 real solution. Because when you take the square root of 0, and then you take something plus 0 and something minus 0, you're going to get the same answer. So if you're a positive number for your discriminant, you get 2 real solutions. A negative number, you get no real solutions. And if your discriminant is 0, you get 1 real solution.